What's good, everyone? Matt here from UK Nets Fans, and we're back with another episode of BK to UK, the British Brooklyn Nets podcast. I'm joined, as ever, by Aidan McConaughey and Cammy Anderson, and today we're going to be looking back at the first round as a whole. There's been a lot of basketball since we came into your feed last time, so we've got plenty to talk about. But obviously, it's all about the Nets and the Celtics. We're going to be answering some of your listener questions and much, much more. Before we do, make sure you're following us on Twitter and Instagram at UK Nets Fans, the pod itself on Twitter at BK2UK Pod, and check us out on YouTube where you can find all of our previous episodes of the pod in video format, ready and waiting for you to catch up on. We're also streaming live as we speak across Twitch, Periscope, and YouTube, so make sure you come join us there too. But with that out of the way, let's get into it. As I said in my brief little intro, we're not going to go through game by game, just because as you hear this, we're going to be gearing up for the next game back in Brooklyn. So at the time of recording, the Nets lead the series 3-1, and we've got the chance to close it out on Tuesday night on our home turf, and we're going to set up a match with the Milwaukee Bucks, who are looking pretty good. The Nets took game 1, 104-93, followed it up with a 130-108 win in game 2. We then went to Boston, dropped that first game 125-119, but then the Nets bounced back in game 4, winning 141-126. So there's been a whole lot of buckets. But I think there's only one place to start, and it's with this big three. Aidan, I'll come to you first, mate. What has this scary hours era been like for you in the early going?
Overall, I mean, I've really been happy with how they've played. I mean, it's crazy to think it's not been perfect at times. I mean, we knew this was going to happen going into the series, that this was going to be a learning curve for this team because of the few minutes that these three stars had played together. But to say that it's not been perfect, but the fact that it's still historically good, considering they're currently on pace to have the highest points per game from a big three in playoffs history in a NBA series, which is crazy. I think it's currently 85.8 points per game they're averaging so far. And if they get that in the next one, that's them top the leaderboard for that. So, I mean, in terms of kind of faults with it so far, we knew there was going to be a couple. I mean, you could say that obviously that game 3 performance, there was plenty to pick at. Kyrie, he wasn't excellent in terms of numbers compared to his other games, but I mean, out with KD and Harden in that one, there wasn't really much production from anyone at all. And you mix that with a 50-piece from Jason Tatum, and the end result's never going to be very good. But I mean, in terms of individually, I think Harden has looked absolutely excellent. I think it looks like that extended time out that the Nets took for him when he re-aggravated his hamstring has paid off absolutely massively. And that could be a big factor in how the Nets do in this playoffs. But yeah, he's looked at an MVP level again, like he did before he went down. So delighted with how he's been looking. I mean, Kevin Durant, he's just been elite, and that's the only word. I mean, I think I took it for granted how much he can elevate his game to another level at the playoffs, just because I didn't watch much Warriors basketball beforehand. I mean, I knew KD was incredible, but I didn't know how well he could elevate his game. And I'll go on to talk about a bit more about how well he's done and kind of certain factors that I didn't even know he could go to later on. But yeah, I've just loved his aggression in general and how he stepped up. And I think for the first time, we can say that he's looked 100%, because we've always kind of said he's maybe at 90%, 95, down to 80 at times. But yeah, I think he's looking 100%, and he looks, certainly at an MVP level again. And in terms of Kyrie, I mean, he's kept his efficiency up constantly, and I was really impressed with him last night. I mean, when you go into a hostile arena like that and every fan in the house is shouting F you Kyrie, and how he showed that elite mentality to go and drop 39 and 11 in that environment is just sublime. And I was so happy for him at the end of that one. I know there's plenty to talk about, as I said before, about that one, which we'll certainly go on to later. But yeah, it might come up, we'll see. But yeah, just quickly to mention the fact that he's currently 100% from the free throw line in this series as well on 20 attempts. Certain factors like that are huge, and the fact we've got so many good free throw shooters is amazing. But to be 100% after 20 attempts in that type of environment is just incredible. So yeah, safe to say I'm really happy, and it's crazy to think that we're gonna be even better shortly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's scary. Obviously, it's scary hours, but the fact that we all kind of had some concerns. See, had to get that in there. Secretly knew you had that on. Just the fact, as Aidan says, they're averaging 85 points between them. And I mean, when you're getting three players kind of averaging that between them, typically it's going to end well. Obviously, the game where Tatum went off, those games happen. And obviously, that was a game that we started fantastically well. And it looked like we'd have genuinely, I mean, we could have scored about 100 points. Just the way we started that one, what was it, 19-4 or something? And we just absolutely flew at the blocks. And then everyone just went a bit pear-shaped. And I think that's probably the main thing you could say is went wrong for us, just bottling that one, given how well we started. You think we kind of would be able to see that out. But yeah, the fact Scary Hours, who, as we always say, almost every single week, have barely played with one another, they look pretty good for having only played, probably about 10, 11 games now between them. And the fact that they're all kind of been able to play those 40 minutes, I think we had questions over whether Nash would kind of play one for a bit longer and two for a bit less or whatever, but they're all kind of roughly sitting around 40 minutes a night. So when you've got three players like that on the court almost entirely, yeah, things are always going to go well. I think the fact that they're scoring so amazingly is you can only kind of celebrate that and be so happy, but at the same time, the other players have obviously kind of suffered. We're not seeing much production from other guys, as Aidan says, and of course, I think if it came down to it, you're always going to want the ball in KD, Harden, or Kyrie's hands rather than a Tyler Johnson or Chris Jones, or just name another kind of bench rotation guy who would maybe pop up with 15 points during the regular season or whatnot. But now they're limited to like a handful, and maybe not necessarily a bad thing, kind of keeps these guys fresh. But then, yeah, I think if we could get them firing a wee bitty, we'll be unstoppable. But yeah, things so far anyway have been really good, aside from obviously dropping that one game. And yeah, Tatum, we said if the Celtics were going to stop us, need Tatum to go off, and he did that. I just don't know what you can say. He's had about 5 or 6 50-point games in the past 2 months or something, which is absolutely insane. And to do it against this Nets team as well, yeah, it says a lot about the kind of player Jason Tatum is. But I think, unfortunately for Tatum and the Celtics, the playoff run's going to come to an end on Tuesday.
Love that decisiveness. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point you said about Aidan, where you said you forget that KD's got another gear when it comes to the postseason, like because he's so incredibly good all the time, and we've said all season about his just effortless 30 point games, and he's just seems to come so naturally to him, because obviously he's the top 2 at least players in the league. So watching that, sort of getting represented in your team's jersey now he plays for the Nets is a thing to behold. And this is the best basketball I've ever watched. Obviously, absolutely as a Nets fan, but yeah, it just doesn't get much better for the points that you guys have raised. I mean, KD's averaging 34.8 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.8 steals. He's averaging 2 blocks a game as well. Like, as well as scoring 32 in game 1, 26 in game 2, 39 in game 3, and 42 in game 4. He's been our best defender as well. Obviously now that Jeff Green's out, but we'll come to that in a little bit of a while. But all this chat, like you say, about him coming back 80 to 90% of his former self, and that still being really good. That's still what Paul George or whatever we said at the time. This could be the best version we've seen of KD yet. He's shown real flashes of being so quick on his feet for a guy that's coming off an Achilles. Him being able to blow past people, and there was one particular play in game 4 that we just watched where I don't know who was defending it. It was probably Jason Tatum, but he kind of blew past to the left, and it was sort of like a run-in sideways floater, like laterally to the basket. It was like just all over the shop. One thing I will say, though, is if I see Kevin Durant fall on the floor again and just not put his arms out and just fully take it on the shoulder, I'm going to lose more hair, I think. So he's just like, it's just not the one. He's got this huge gaping wound almost in his shoulder bones hanging out. And the man's not got a lot of meat on him to kind of protect that slim frame. So I could do with seeing less of that. But yeah, he talking about his defense, he absolutely had Jason Tatum in his pocket the first sort of two games at least. And obviously you say he had that breakout game where he scored 50, and all I can do is shower praise on him for what he did in that game. He absolutely went off. But there's been some, Tristan Thompson's had a double game. I think that was the same game where some players will just have flashes, like Robert Williams III looking like Dikembe Mutombo out there, like in that first game where he's just blocking and swatting absolutely everything. So, there's going to be players that have these games, but it's just not sustainable in a 7-game series. And that's what we've been saying, the whole run up to this playoffs. And, the Celtics, got back to their home court. They got fans in the stands, and, it lifted them. And then, in the game 4, where they had even more fans in the stands, they lifted in even more. But in that second half, they kind of got a little bit quieter. The FU Kyrie chants and all the boos were getting significantly quieter as we went into that second half. And obviously, we'll come to what happened at the end of that game in a little bit. But yeah, KD's been incredible. James Harden dropped 18 assists in game 4, and no one really realized, even though he almost tied the Nets franchise record for the most assists in a playoff game. And that 18 assists was more assists than the entire team recorded in the previous game where we lost. Exploded for 41 points in game 3, dropping 7 threes in that game, which tied Joe Harris's record. I almost feel a bit bad for doing that. For Joe Harris, got all that sort of love for scoring 7 threes in a game, and then James Harden just does it, and no one really notices because he's so good the following game. And yeah, what more can you say about Kyrie Irving? Obviously, I think that first game back in Boston has just, that obviously shook him, and you could see he was a little bit rattled. But how could you not be when you've got thousands of people just wishing absolute worst on you when you're just trying to do your job? But he's reverted to the mean, and you saw that in game 4 when it was just real good basketball from that big 3. And I think we can absolutely do away with all this chemistry chat that seems to be permeating through. But we're sitting pretty. They nicked one off us, but as you said, Cammy, we would have had to, something special would have had to happen for this Boston team to beat us, and something special happened, and then we whooped them after that. So just one of those, unfortunately. But as I say, we're not going to go into each and every game. But I just wondered what you guys were thinking about, just some highlights and some lowlights from what you've seen across the past 4 games. What's gone right, and more importantly, what's gone wrong? What can we learn from these games we've played so far?
So I mean, we've just waxed lyrical there about them. I think it's fair to say the big 3 have been all right. We've already kind of named some of those numbers. I think that's the obvious one for what's kind of went right. What's went wrong, I kind of touched on it just when I was speaking earlier on about the fact others aren't really contributing. Obviously, we've still managed to get free wins from 4 games without kind of big contributions. I'm trying to even think who's kind of the highest scorer over that time or whatever, kind of not in that kind of scary hours trio. But yeah, I think that's probably that. And then obviously the Jeff Green injury, losing him after 2 games. I think there is a listener question from Elliot asking about how big and how important a return of Jeff Green will be. And I think that's probably one of those things that we need to wait and see. He wasn't exactly setting the world alight during the series. Only, I think, averaging about a handful of points. And it's a tough one. But Jeff Green's been one of those players who's just been solid all season, and it's that veteran presence. And yeah, he's a player that can, when on the court, just give that something extra. Obviously, there's that kind of famous chat they had with the locker room that I think will go down in the Nets kind of folklore history. The thing that kind of turned everything round on the pool run. And yeah, I think him coming back will be maybe a bit bigger of a boost than most people would probably expect.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Cammy mentioned the big 3. That's obviously what's went right. But I mean, I think if you look what Steve Nash has done, and and the fact that he's obviously played them as much as he can, I think that's certainly a benefit, because I think that's going to benefit more in the later stages, that he is taking the time now to play them as much as they can, just so that they can get those minutes together. And I think he's done the right thing, definitely. And I think you touched on it earlier, obviously, with Kevin Durant. Defensively, mainly in the first two games, was potentially some of the best defensive basketball we've seen from the Nets this year. And I think, the way Kevin Durant led it almost was back to that all-defense level of play. And if we can get that from him, especially from a guy of that size, it does play such a huge factor in the fact that we are playing smaller guys at the 4 and the 5 and Harris and Griffin. So, long may that continue. And hopefully that blip the other night was just a one-off. But in terms of the rotation, obviously we've cut that down to 9 for all the important minutes anyway. And I think it's worked well. I think Nash has went with the right guys, and there's nothing that would really change. Just having a quick look at the players he's went with. I mean, there's obviously an argument that you could potentially bring in DeAndre Jordan or Johnson in there, and I think, to be honest with you, it has benefited at times staying smaller and then causing big guys, the big defenders, problems. Like, you've seen Tristan Thompson get caught out so many times defensively when anyone kind of wants to get switched on Tristan Thompson, and I think James Harden must be 100% on step back threes over him in this series. But in terms of what went wrong, it's difficult. I think, the guys outside the big three, it's not been talked about enough that the role players have had to adjust to their new roles as well. And I think that's probably harder for them than it is for the big three coming in and playing together. I mean, those guys can come into any situation and play well, but I'd say that Joe Harris and Blake Griffin, obviously being the 4th and 5th starters, I'd say they've probably only each had 2 out of the 4 games where they've played really well. And I think it's going to take time for them to get their kind of positions solidified in that team and what their roles are. And in terms of the bench as well, I mean, it's difficult because they're playing reduced minutes, and we've obviously been used to seeing some quite nice scoring numbers this year from our bench, and they're playing in smaller roles, and as Cammy mentioned earlier, they're usually with a Harden or a Kyrie at the same time, and everything is going through them at that time. But apart from that, the only thing that I'd really dig out would say Nash's timeouts still feel like a big issue, especially in that loss. I don't like this let them figure it out as they go along mentality, especially in the playoffs. It just feels dangerous at times, and I think there was some times where we should have stopped the Celtics run by taking a timeout, and he just kind of kept it going, and that's where we lost it really. We could never get back into the game. But I mean, in terms of rebounding as well, I mean, just to touch on that, we knew it was going to be an issue, and we've made Tristan Thompson look like a beast, but we've been doing that with mediocre centres for years, and I don't think it's time to change that. We've just got to accept it's going to happen. So, Tristan Thompson isn't worrying me at all, especially going into this final game. He's still kind of a mediocre guy that's maybe going to get 15 points, but he really doesn't have a big impact in the game.
Yeah, I think what I noticed early, just piggybacking off what you were saying about Blake Griffin and having a kind of stop-start kind of series. I think especially in that, the first game of this series, you saw everyone was just switching on to Blake. And that kind of, you could almost see what the Celtics were trying to do and really kind of targeting him on that. Because I think, and I'll probably get sort of flamed out in the comments for this, but I think, where the Celtics don't really have a good big, they don't really rely on that kind of size and sort of power down low. And it's all just sort of getting it into Jason Tatum's hands and kind of relying on that kind of drawing them out to the wing and breezing past them sort of style of attack rather than kind of banging down low. So I think as sort of matchups change, and we'll probably discuss this later on in the pod, but I think Blake will probably be a little bit better. He hasn't taken as many threes as I thought he would as well. Whether or not that's just kind of keeping the space in for everyone else going, you don't need Blake to be out on the wing when you've got KD, Kyrie, James Harden, and Joe Harris. So it's probably one of those things, but that's just something I noticed. Something that has gone right is just our ridiculously efficient offense. We were impressed enough with Kyrie's 50-40-90 club season, but in game 4, the Nets team as a whole, obviously spearheaded by the big three, were within a few percentage points of finishing the game. The playoffs only ever 60-60-100 games, which is ridiculous. I think they were 57, 56, 90, 7 or something. Like we missed one free throw of the 30 we took, which is ridiculous. But great. We've already touched on we've got all the chemistry in the world. So anyone saying, yeah, but they've not played together, I think that's just once you get to a certain superstar caliber of player, I just don't think it matters. And whether or not that has implications out for like the rest of the league, time will tell if we start causing a bit of a chain reaction and players will just get real comfortable throughout the season and just turn it on the playoffs. But, not everyone has got this big free. The injury to Jeff Green has obviously been something that's gone really wrong for us. When he went down with that, what is it? The plantar fascia, whatever it is, dodgy foot. He said he was going to be reassessed in 10 days. I think that obviously takes us into the second round. So there's a if that all goes well, then he could be back for this Bucks series, which would be huge. The thing is, when you take Jeff Green out of the rotation, you guys probably saw as well, but you see people like getting around on Twitter where they're saying stuff like, you've got the big three and all these people, and you're saying because you haven't got Jeff Green, you're going to lose. And they obviously don't understand how good Jeff Green is. But if you're not playing Jeff Green at the 5, you've got to play, Nick Claxton or Blake and in all those sort of things, and you just don't have the shooting. So it just mucks stuff up. So I really, really do hope Jeff Green comes back soon, fit and healthy. Rebounding, I think, we could come up with a drinking game, BK2UK drinking game, whereas if we talk about, silly not being aggressive enough on the boards, then you could probably get pretty steaming if you listen along to this podcast. Foul trouble in this series, I think both teams have sort of suffered from this a little bit. I don't know what you guys think, but the refs have just been so keen to blow their whistle it seems like every time down the floor they're just blowing up for every little thing. And I think Jason Tatum shot 30 odd free throws in the last game or something. It's been absolutely ridiculous. So that kind of needs to stop. I know Bruce Brown gets stung with giving away fouls a lot of the time, but I think it's just these refs, they kind of flip a coin almost in their head and decide whether or not it's a foul or not. So that's been a bit annoying. And just the general, again, symptomatic of stuff we've seen over the season is just we've been super slow to get started. We'll let them come into it kind of in the first quarter or so, and then it's not until partway through the second quarter and hopefully into the third and fourth where we actually pull away and sort of start blowing these teams out. But we're 3-1. We've got so much good to talk about. It seems, I guess we're in the business of trying to find nitpicky things to moan about, but we'll find them because we're here to discuss this team. So, but yeah, we're still in a good place, and we're still going to be looking ahead to what is hopefully a Nets in 5 season series win. But unless you guys have any more thoughts about what's gone on in the series so far, we need to address the elephant in the room. Cammy, I'm going to come to you first on this. And Kyrie Irving's return to Boston, to a hostile TD Garden. What have you made of it so far?
I mean, I think we all knew there was going to be some hostility there with the way he kind of left the teams. I'm going to be back next year. And then was with us the following season. Yeah, it was always going to be quite hostile. You kind of expect the boos and the kind of swearing and the kind of jeering and stuff. But I don't think anyone really expected folk to get to the point where they were throwing bottles. I mean, well, I'm saying bottles. It was one bottle, and yes, there's going to be folk going, it's only a plastic bottle. And yeah, I agree with that. It is a plastic bottle. It's not going to do anyone any harm whatsoever, but it's still, what's the point? It just makes no sense. Obviously, Kyrie certainly got the last laugh, 39 points. We got the win. Just the guy that threw it got himself arrested and probably lost his privileges of attending a Celtics game at TD Garden ever again in his life, all for throwing a water bottle because he was a wee bit angry Kyrie never returned. And I mean, yeah, it's just, I don't know what you can say. It's just sheer stupidity. And I quite like what Kyrie had kind of said after the game. It's unfortunate that sports has come to this crossroads where a lot of old ways are coming up. It's been that way for entertainment for a long time, of underlying racism and just treating people like they're in a human zoo. Now, we've obviously seen several incidents in the playoffs as we've seen Russell Westbrook have popcorn thrown at him and just, I just don't get. Imagine paying thousands for a ticket to do that. Like, it genuinely blows my mind when we're sitting here and we'd happily pay thousands for a ticket, and then there's folk pay thousands for a ticket and do that. And I mean, it's just, I'm really lost for words on what you can really say. It's stupid. There's no way that you can possibly condone it or say, yeah, this is great. He deserved it. There's not. And then obviously, Kyrie maybe added a little bit of fuel to the fire with his stomp, his kind of rub his foot over the Celtics logo. I don't know what we'll call it. We'll say stomp, but yeah, I think that would have certainly angered fans. But Matt, I've got to mention the tweet that you put out on the on the UK Nets fans account about being able to buy a Boston Celtics doormat, which you can quite literally wipe your feet on. I mean, they'll do it every day, but not think twice about it. Kyrie Irving does it. That's a big problem. But I mean, yeah, that's not up for me to decide. So I'm not sure what you thought. I'm sure you will both be on the kind of same train of thought as me that it was wrong, it was silly, and Kyrie's ultimately going to get the last laugh when we dump the Celtics out the playoffs. And yeah, that's what you can really hope for.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the ball, it's absolutely inexcusable. I mean, you can chant Kyrie sucks, which we've talked about on many occasions, must be the least offensive chant of all time, and no one really cares about that. Or you can say that all you want, but to throw stuff at these players, 3 separate incidents in just over a week, where obviously you've had a Celtics fan, a Sixers fan, and a Knicks fan, who define themselves probably the most passionate fans in the country. I mean, that's not passion. I mean, that's sheer thuggery from like these 3 guys who've just taken it far too far, and it's borderline insane that you would go to a sports game with the intention to do something like that. Or if you don't go with the intention like that, why have you let yourself get that angry where you're going to do something as stupid as that? I just don't see why people can't just enjoy themselves without having to take it too far. And I know it's obviously a minority, and I did like seeing the Celtics kind of fans pointing out who it was. I mean, probably them going, oh, I don't want to get the blame for this, it was that guy. But at the end of the day, if you can point out someone that's being an absolute idiot and ruin it for everyone, it just makes so much sense. But I mean, yeah, you mentioned there, Cammy obviously said it's a plastic bottle, but it looked full to me in the speed that it came in. A plastic bottle like that at that pace from that distance, which looked quite far from the video footage I've seen, could have done a lot of damage if it caught him in the wrong place in his face. We know that he's had damage to his face before where he's had to wear a mask and stuff. And yeah, that would have been absolutely awful. And I think if it did catch him, Tyler Johnson would have probably been up in that stance, having a few words potentially with that fan, or we'll put it that way. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the stomping on the logo or whatever you want to call it, I mean, let's face it, the Boston fans were chanting F you Kyrie all night, and suddenly they're offended that he stomped on a logo who I've just found out is called Lucky, which I find really, really funny. But it's all night players have been running over it, and you're suddenly offended at it after you've told a guy to F you literally all night. I think they really need to have a look at their priorities, because that's really embarrassing. If you're going to swear at someone all night and then get offended at something as small as that, I would have done the same thing if I was Kyrie. I probably would have done it twice. So, yeah, there we go.
It's funny, isn't it? Because, right, so I want to put it out there that it's obviously not all Celtics fans. There are some Celtics fans, especially like in UK Celtics fans, who I completely respect and I really love like interacting with, your Rich Barretts, your Boston Brits, your Josh Coynes, all that kind of stuff. And I'm by no means trying to, anything I say going forward, by no means, I'm not trying to paint everyone with the same brush. But it's just like, I think it all stemmed off but with the build up of returning to Boston, right? And there was this video that went round, and there was this fella, and he was like, I'm Michael, and let me tell you why I'm going to boo the living daylights out of you. And we all had a little bit of a giggle in the Discord. It's like giving someone the thumbs down, or like giving them like the wiggly fingers on your nose. It's just like, mate, like it's booing. Like it must be a British thing, but I've never been serious while I've booed anything. No. I
don't think anyone in the UK has.
No, it's just pantomime. No. It's literally panto. And for them to be like this serious, boo you, you're a duty head. And it's just so weird. And I think that's just like possibly a cultural thing, and I get it. And Cammy's gone. But it's just like, I just don't see how like you can go from that and then like just obviously the other extreme is like, you know, gobbing at people if you're at that Knicks game, dumping popcorn on people and throwing bottles and stuff, which is obviously just stupid. Obviously, I understand that Kyrie, you can go and say it was premeditated and all that kind of stuff, but it's something he decided to do, and all that kind of stuff. But the stomp and the wipe, I mean. But I don't see it as any different from Trae Young giving it the you like opposing players like cupping your ears or see you in the A or sort of shushing the crowd or, you know, Dame Lillard waving goodbye. It's just like, it's exactly the same. And I just can't relate to people that would see like that take it so seriously that disrespecting their badge actually gets them angry. Like us three are sat in our free time, thousands of miles away, doing a podcast every week. We're pretty into the Nets, right? This is our team. But I think, you know, I'm probably not alone when it's just like, if someone like stamped on a Nets jersey in front of me, I'm not gonna be ready to throw down. Do you know what I mean? It's just a weird thing to just be like get so wound up about respect and like it's just like this whole like denting someone's pride. It's just I don't get it. Like it's just not that deep, man. But that's what I think. Obviously, it's really, really cool to see KD and the rest of the teams rally around Kyrie when he's obviously been feeling stuff. But yeah, all things going well, we're not going to be returning to Boston again this season. Fingers crossed we'll tie it up on this game on Tuesday, and that'll be that. But yeah, that's it. I would absolutely love to know what some other people think. So let us know in the comments or get at us on social, because, you know, there's been some spirited debate on that, and I'm sure long will it continue. But yeah, thanks for all your listener questions. We've kind of sprinkled those in throughout our discussions. But I don't want to be accused of looking too far ahead. But with I would be very, very shocked if the Celtics do come back from 3-1 down to push the Nets to another game and win the series. So we're going to tentatively look ahead to what will be, now we know, after the sweeping of the Miami Heat. We're going to be playing the Bucks. If we make it past Boston, we're going to be playing the Bucks. And just to look ahead to that second round, don't know who wants to take this first, but, you know, it could be as early as Saturday. How do you guys see this the Bucks matchup going?
Yeah, I'll take it, Cammy. Yeah, it's going to be huge, and at the end of the day, it could end up being an absolute classic of a series, just because of how well the Bucks are playing, how well they're playing, how good the Nets are. But yeah, I mean, in terms of kind of matchups, key players for the Bucks and things like that, I mean, you can't talk about the Bucks without talking about Giannis. It's an obviously he's going to be a big factor, and unfortunately, the type of game that Giannis has, it exposes every single one of the Nets' main weaknesses, which is obviously size, offensive rebounding, driving at the rim. I mean, if you were to look at any positives with regards to playing against Giannis, he's not always had great games against the Nets in recent years. I think he struggles, especially on the defensive end, with how fast the Nets are. I mean, he's not that quick defensively, and he quite likes kind of bodying guys, but the Nets just seem to be a bit too quick for him. So that is a kind of huge boost for us. But obviously, we heard this week that DiVincenzo was going to be out for the rest of the playoffs. Now, a lot of players, a lot of kind of people on Twitter were kind of brushing that one off. I think that's a massive loss for them, and they'll be absolutely gutted with that. And the reason being for this matchup for them in particular, because we all know Jrue Holiday's a great defender. I'm not going to say he's elite, because personally I'm in a small minority where I don't actually think he's that elite at all, especially when there's been some some guys getting 50 on him this year with ease. But yeah, I think he's probably going to be taking one of Harden or Kyrie, and they were hoping that DiVincenzo was probably going to take the other one. And that's going to be a huge blow for them, that they're going to have to get someone on, probably one of their shooters like a Pat Connaughton or a Bryn Forbes or something like that, who is offensively good but defensively not that great. And the fact that they're going to be having to guard Harden or Kyrie is going to make these things really difficult. And I think DiVincenzo as well is one of the best rebounders for a guard, probably up there with James Harden. And especially when you've got someone like Brook Lopez, who really is one of the poorest rebounding centres in the league, I'd say, yeah, that's a bigger blow for them than it would be if Jeff Green was going to be out for this entire series. And I think that says a lot, because we know Jeff Green's probably going to be our sixth man of the year in terms of the playoffs this year. But yeah, I just think in terms of this team, and I mean, I don't want to talk about the Bucks too much because, yeah, we're not there yet. But at the end of the day, I think it's looking likely that we're going to get out and play them on Saturday. It's going to be really, really important that we do guard the three-point line against this Bucks team, because I'd say there's not many better three-point shooting teams than the Nets in the league, but the Bucks are really, really good. And guys like Middleton, I mentioned Forbes and Connaughton, they're all really good shooters who have all kind of went off at least one point in this first round. So yeah, they need to just be really careful that they don't let down their guard when they're defending, because the Bucks can get hot really quickly. And yeah, just in general, they obviously swept Miami, and I think, yeah, they looked absolutely excellent in all four, but the Heat were really, really poor. And I don't know if you guys caught any of those games. I tend to watch a couple just because I anticipated that we were going to be playing one of them in the next round. And yeah, I wouldn't get too excited if I was a Bucks fan about that one, because Miami did look really, really poor. But yeah, the Bucks just look like they have stepped up a level, because they're probably at that stage now where if they don't win now, then when are they going to win? Because the Nets are going to keep getting better. Everyone else is going to keep getting better. So this is going to be quite a hotly contested series, I think. And it wouldn't surprise me if it did go to 7 games, but you've got to hope that the Nets can maybe get it and say 6. I think the biggest factor, if you were to look out for one big factor with this one, it's got to be that the Nets win those first 2 games at home. And I think that's been a big one in this one. I think if we dropped one of the first ones against the Celtics, then there'd maybe be a few more questions about us dropping a game. But yeah, winning these first 2 games could be absolutely massive. And that's where I underestimated home court advantage for a long time. But after kind of seeing that, and if we potentially get the first 2 wins, then it'd be much more comfortable going to Milwaukee.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would also be a massive boost. And I think, as you said, Giannis is the obvious key man. And if we thought Jason Tatum was hard enough in this, Giannis is going to be 10 times harder, if not more. Giannis is our player who's torched us fairly recently. As you say, he exposes all our weaknesses, and we just couldn't deal with him. Even when we were kind of letting him just take threes, he was sinking them. So it's like he really is, as much as he's a player who gets to the rim, can bully himself kind of into the post and just do whatever he kind of wants. If he can't do that, which is very rare, he can pull up from free, and that's something we've to obviously be wary of. I think if we manage to somehow stop him, that will give us success, much like with Tatum. I think I'd like to say we'll do it in 6. To say we'll not drop any, I think would be a lie. It would take something sensational like Giannis not playing whatsoever for us to have any chance of a sweep. I think that, yeah, the Bucks are surely going to pick up at least 1, if not 2 wins in this one, and we're just going to need to accept it. Hope that we're kind of close enough to them in these losses and it's not complete blowouts. And as Ian says, got to try and make sure that we get the wins at home. I think, especially when the fans are back in the stands, maybe it does make a real difference. And yes, it's potentially going to be a classic, but I'm not wanting to say too much. I am maybe being a bit superstitious, and I'm just a bit worried as well. It's a huge game, and just with the expectations we've got and the kind of hopes we all have as fans, you don't want to see it kind of end here. So I don't want to get my hopes up too high, but certainly you've got to go in it with a bit of confidence. And also, as we said, the Bucks swept the Heat, and I think you could probably look at the fact they've had a few extra days off in 2 ways. One, they're freshly rested. We could play 1, if not 2, maybe even 3 more games by the time we face off against them in a worst case scenario. Whereas they'll then had, say, a week or so off, and I mean that would be great. I think players would love that in the playoffs. The more rest you get, probably the better. But at the same time, while we're still playing basketball, we're still in the kind of groove, whereas they could potentially fall out of that if they're not playing for an extra week or whatever. It's then you're kind of losing that, whereas we could go right in, kind of rolling off, winning, well, potentially Game 7 if it went to that, and then have that confidence, whereas the Bucks would have kind of come back down to earth, they've been chilling out a wee bit. But yeah, I'll say Nets in 6, but if it goes to 7, I'd like to still hope we can win it.
Nice. Well, the guys from the Grit and Grind pod have joined us in the chat to say that they chose the Nets in 6 before the playoffs started. So you're in good company there. I think, yeah, it's when the Bucks have been so dominant in the kind of the lead up to meeting them, you can't help but feel, you can't help but take them seriously, we should say. But another way to think about that is, they haven't, with all due respect to Miami, they couldn't hit what's the old football analogy where they couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with some of the shots they were putting up. So, as much as the Bucks are going to be a tougher out than Boston, the Bucks haven't had to face an historic offense like the Nets have been. I'm just trying to have a look as we speak on kind of what the kind of performance from the Bucks has been over this first round so far, and they've put up an average of 118 points on Miami versus Brooklyn's 123 points per game. So I think what I'm most concerned about is the Nets beating themselves rather than the Bucks beating us, and it just goes back to taking timeouts to stop momentum. I think you see Giannis kind of hulking up and huffing and puffing and all that kind of stuff when he gets momentum and when he gets going, and that's formidable, and that's tough to stop. I don't care who you are, and with our defense not being our core strength, should we say, that's something that you've got to admire in that Bucks team, and Chris Middleton as well has seemingly had an incredible series. Sometimes goes under the radar when it comes to talking about the Bucks, but he's been incredible. And shout out Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez comes back to Barclays, and it's always nice to see Brookie come back. But yeah, I do think Nets in 6 would be great. But yeah, I really want us to have those first 2 games. I'm going to sit on the fence as well. I'm going to get splinters in my ass. I'm going to sit on this fence with you, Cammy. But we shall see. Let's deal with Boston first. Let's regroup. I'm just having a look at the Twitter sphere now, and it looks like Alize Johnson and Jeff Green are still out for Game 5. Bit of a shame that we've not seen Alize, because especially he could help us on the boards. But yeah, just one of those things. Fingers crossed he's back soon. So that's what we've got to look ahead with the Bucks. But it is now time. Just before we do get him, Grit and Crime back through on the comments as already. Brook Lopez actually dominated inside in round 1. That could be a problem for the Nets. Yeah, that is absolutely what I'm worried about. I don't know about you two. What have you guys made of Brook? Have you seen much of him in these playoffs?
Yeah, he's done well. I think I saw a few big games. I think he had about a 25-point game at one point. But I mean, personally, I think he's not a good matchup against this Nets team. But I was just about to mention, just in terms of, in general, just a quick one for you guys. Who do you think there's more pressure on in this series, the Bucks or the Nets, to win, as in to actually get through and win the championship? Because I personally think the Bucks have just as much pressure than us with the amount that they've done to that team this year.
I'd probably say 50-50. I think with what you said about them really needing to win, and we don't necessarily need to win. I mean, we do and we don't. I think the expectation is that we will and kind of must, but this is the kind of first year we've had a lot of disruption in that year, and I think many expect us to go on and win, whereas the Bucks, it is kind of only just kind of held on to Giannis in the kind of previous summer, and I mean that was huge for them. If he'd left, I mean, the Bucks had, they'd lost any chance of winning anything, really, if Giannis had left. The fact they've got him, tied him down for, another few seasons at least, they've got to go for it. And that could well play in our favour. They maybe overdo it. They try too hard. And I maybe knacker themselves, or they just try too many maybe extravagant plays, or I don't know. It could actually play in our favour. I think the home games will certainly have a lot of pressure on us, as much as the Nets faithful are supportive. The kind of games in Milwaukee could be very difficult for the Bucks. We know their kind of ability in the regular season, but it's kind of the playoffs when they kind of come undone. And yeah, they've got kind of through that first round. They're coming up against possibly the best team probably the best team they'll face in the playoffs, even if they manage to somehow beat us. So yeah, there's going to be enormous pressure on them. So yeah, I think I'll say 50-50, but I guess you could say it'll swing side to side depending on the venue of the match.
Yeah, absolutely. Big up Keith McPherson in the chat. Thanks for coming through, bro. Yeah, I think that Bucks series is going to be an absolute killer. I think they've also pulled through a load of confidence from that kind of late season 2-game mini series we had. So that's going to be stinging in their heads. So they're definitely going to be smelling blood when it comes to this Nets team. But you know, we've spoken all episode about this kind of playoff intensity and how it's ramped up. So, you know, I'm not worried about anyone, but you know, I'm putting some respect on the Bucks name. But yeah, so that's all the Nets chat we've got for this particular section. But it's time for the Seafoam section. We're going to give you the lowdown on the Liberty, and yeah, it's time. We're self-confessed newbies to following the W, but what a time to get involved in this incredible league. I know you guys have picked up League Pass. It was 15, 16 quid for the entire League Pass, which is incredible value. With this league winding down and more teams sort of losing out, watching their team playing basketball as we go on. It's dope. So we're going to be doing more of these sort of little mini Liberty sections. And yeah, Cami, we need to chat about Sabrina Ionescu and Benigja Laney specifically. But what have you made about this hot start that the Liberty have had to the season?
I mean, it's been incredible, especially considering that the Libs won 2 games last season. There weren't many expectations heading into this season. It was quite a young team, and I think many were just kind of looking forward to seeing many of these girls play together. I think it was 7 rookies played last season. This season, obviously, many of them in their kind of second seasons in the league. Sabrina's technically only in her first. She only played the few games in her first season, and I mean, yeah, it's been very exciting. 5-2 after 7 played. I'd like to apologise to the New York Liberty. One of those losses came because I never watched. I've not actually seen us lose a game. The other game I've seen bits of, so I'm not kind of, I think it was Doug Berak also tweeted he'd seen bits of a game that we lost, but he didn't see the full game, so he wasn't counting that. So I'm not going to count that either. So the only game that I've not seen a single second of, we lost. So yeah, I'm sorry for that. And clearly the ones I watched, we win. So I don't know. I'm just a good luck charm. But yeah, it's been fantastic. I was doing kind of research, listening to some podcasts, and I think many were saying Liberty could maybe sneak into the playoffs or maybe just kind of not finish bottom of the pile, and I think that could be considered a good season. But based on this, with about 3/4 of the season to go, the Liberty could finish in about 20 wins, which would be 10 times as good as last season. And yeah, it's been incredible. It's been really good just kind of watching and kind of getting to know the players. And yeah, I think you've mentioned them, Sabrina Ionescu and Benigja Laney. Can we get them on the Nets as well? Because they are that good. I love them to pieces. They're just absolute ballers.
Yeah, they are serious players. Benigja Laney especially, so I think what most kind of casual or new WNBA fans will be guilty of is, getting caught up in this Sabrina Ionescu hype, right? Coming out of college, she's an absolute baller, breaking records left, right, and center. And I can see the more sort of dedicated WNBA fans being like, okay, Sabrina's good, but there are all these other incredible players. And I just want to sort of shine a light on some other ones that I just wanted to get your opinion of, Cami, that have been sticking out to you. First and foremost, Benigja Laney, who was on a streak. I'm not sure what she's done in the last couple of games, but she scored sort of 30 on opening night and then just couldn't not score 20 points. She was I think it was the first opening 5 games she scored 20 or more points. So I think she's top 4 in scoring in the league, she's just been incredible. Sammy Whitcomb, who is a new sign-in, she's a veteran sharpshooter. So the amount of defense that she turns into offense, she's got that kind of pull-up free where, you just run in transition and they just stop dead and shoot a free and it's in, and you're just like, yeah, that's the most disrespectful and nothing you can do about it shot in basketball. But Michaela Onyenwere as well. She's our rookie at UCLA. She's been incredible. She dropped a career high 29 in a game recently. But yeah, if you're listening to this and you're not on the WNBA train, do yourself a favor. It's incredible. And for those watching along live on Twitch, on YouTube, on Periscope, or watching back on YouTube, you can look as good as Cami in his Seafoam season Sabrina Ionescu jersey. It is an absolute peach. Yeah, beautiful. So the Liberty are currently in second at time of recording, 5-2. Yeah, it's just been real good. Another little bit of news though. So Leisure Clarendon, who's a massive leader of the team, especially in her kind of time she's had with the Libs, they've been waived to make way for former Defensive Player of the Year, Natasha Howard. And they've since joined the Minnesota Lynx. So it was really strange because they were kind of one of my favorite players watching last season. I just love a point guard because, it's just one of the weird kind of things watching basketball. I can get being a point guard because that's the position you're more likely to play as a short, skinny kid in England playing basketball, but it's just one of those. So Leisure Clarendon was really cool, and it's kind of gutting to see them go, but they've landed on their feet and they're in Minnesota, which, unlike the men's game, Minnesota are a very, very decent team. So yeah, really cool. You got anything to?
Yeah, it is. So just going back to Sabrina, obviously, I think, I can't remember if I said this last time we kind of had this Liberty Lowdown Seafoam section, but it's scary how good she is already. Like you're saying, and rightly so, there's so many other stars in this league. It's not just the Sabrina League, as much as I think it will be for probably the next decade. I can't help but feel it's a bit like watching Kyrie, and now I know me and you have spoken about this, and it's kind of like the cardinal sin of comparing a WNBA player to an NBA player or vice versa. But it's not in terms of their play styles, but more just like when watching Kyrie, you can't take your eyes off of him. And it's much the same with Sabrina. It's just, you can kind of just sense she can do something magical, much like Kyrie. She can hit the clutch shots. She can just hit big shots. And she's just, been absolutely phenomenal. I think it's about 16 points, 7 assists, and about 6 rebounds, nearly 7 rebounds. So, yeah, she's been absolutely phenomenal. Back to bit Nigel Laney, that stat, as you said, really, really hot start to the season, and obviously it's just been fantastic seeing her do what she's doing. I think she's 3rd for points per game and 4th for total points, or vice versa. So to have someone scoring at that rate, it's obviously always going to help you. And the fact that it's helped the Liberty to quite a historic start. I'm not exactly sure if it's historic, but it certainly seems that in comparison to last season, obviously not as many games as kind of previous weeks. We kind of had the lots of games thick and fast, but now other teams who've maybe only played 4 or 5 are now kind of catching up. So we've got kind of a few days off in between games now, and it's sad because it's just been nice. It's been a nice change of pace, and as you say, Matt, if you've not kind of jumped on the W train yet, get on board because it is really, really fun to watch. And if you take it for what it is, and yeah, you'll just really enjoy it. Lots of characters in it, much like the kind of men's game, and yeah, it's just fantastic. And as we said again, these jerseys, the best jerseys in New York, and I'm not hearing otherwise.
Nice, yeah, love that. So we will be keeping on bringing you the Liberty news as it comes through throughout the season. But that'll do us, I think, for this particular episode. We hope you all enjoyed this week's episode of BK UK. Thanks very, very much for listening. Thanks to everyone that came through in the chat. Please subscribe, rate, review the pod where you can. Head to teespring.com/stores/UK Nets fans, where you can buy our merch, including Scary Hours tees and all that kind of good stuff. Bruce Brown Appreciation Club. And yeah, thanks for coming through, and we'll see you next time.